Okay, here we are at the Unity Museum. Hello, Nasrine.
Hello.
Welcome to the Unity Museum.
Thank you.
And so what we'll begin with here is really where it all began, and that is with our Native American community and the history of the elders. So just sort of follow me and come this way. So due to the fact that Peter, my husband, just died, we have a little bit of his history. So this is the Civil War. His family were generals in the Civil War.
Wonderful.
His family was also, his grandfather was a general in World War One. His father, that's Peter right there, and of course, you know, many have met him. His father here was the signing, arranged for the signing on the Missouri for the Japanese surrender at the end of World War One, and then the rest of his family were, for instance, the mayor of San Francisco was Van Ness. So there are a lot of Van Nesses. He was also the builder and coordinator of the tomb of the unknown soldier in Washington D.C., where the president always laid their wreath, because he brought back, after World War One, he brought the Gold Star mothers to France and decided that they couldn't go every year to France, and so he had a place of remembrance over here in the United States in Washington D.C. You have the history of the University District, with, of course, the first female mayor in the United States, who lived right here in the U.S. Her name is Bertha Knight Landis, and she lived right up the street. Now, coming here, in here we have really a welcome lounge for our dignitaries, for students, for keynote speakers, and it's basically a place to call home. So you can have books, you can sit on the fireplace. We have social distancing. You can play chess, and that's Queen Marie of Romania, the first royalty that became a Baha'i through Martha Root. And there you have the principles of the Baha'i faith on the easel. Now over here, we have what we call so we can get together and have either a wonderful dinner. We have very beautiful china, and or we have more books, or you can have a fancy tea if you want to, or we can watch an evening movie and have fun with documentaries. Right now, our documentaries are all about climate change. Over there in our sort of storeroom, we have a 3D printer and a hot press, and our costumes and arts and crafts. Our little tiny kitchen, where we offer free tea, free coffee, and just follow me here. Cameron bakes for us in this tiny little convection oven. Wow. Every week he bakes for us chocolate chip cookies or cakes. These are my travels. And all these pictures are kind of starting to fall down, but this is Peter. Now let's walk through. The Unity Museum is an interfaith or one common faith location where we also talk about spirituality. So this is our meditation room, and in our meditation room we recognize all the messengers of God. And so here we can meditate on books on the Baha'i faith study, on Christianity, on Judaism, on Islam, on Buddhism, Zoroastrianism, Hinduism. We also in our native believers right there. And then of course we have the cause and rise and fall of civilization that sort of pulls everything together. But it really is a meditation room for all the faiths.
Beautiful.
So then we go, but as Baha'is, one of the principles is science and religion. So here we now go into our museum, and And our museum basically concentrates on the topic of the principles of the Baha'i faith. So on the left side, come here with me. So on the left side, we have an exhibit on the history of pandemics, because we're in the middle of a pandemic, since 1800. At the end of the museum, we have the history of Seattle. And on the right side of the museum, we have recognizing some of the early women in the state of Washington. However, we are expanding. We have started our new exhibit. So right in the beginning, here we have Princess Angelina, the daughter of Chief Seattle. So we talk a little bit about her history and the beginning here really of the native sort of part of the Seattle and the Northwest. But the second exhibit that we're just working on right now is about global drift, meaning that at one time, this whole earth was really Gondwana land or one continent. And then Dr. Edwin Colbert, which is Dr. Amy Colbert, it's her father, who proved the theory that at one time, the theory of what they call a global drift. So here you have items. Sometimes we get asked, what are the oldest items in our tiny museum? Well, this item right here is 48 million years old.
Wow.
This item here is probably closer to 100 million years old. Wow. So yes, we do have some very old items.
It is older than me, isn't it?
So, but this is right, and we are about to make it. This next one will be the history of the very first ever conservationist, and his name is Sir Richard St. Bob Baker, and he is a Baha'i. It's not in there yet. So he is a Baha'i, and we will be talking about the history of the Man of Trees and have a campaign for the entire year concentrating on conservation and climate change. Wow. So you say, what's this in the middle?
What is this? Yeah.
Yeah, so what's this in the middle? This really is a history train that goes into the past, into the future. So this is our time tunnel. And here we start with 1800. Oh. So at 1800, you have Lewis and Clark, you have the invention of the steam engine, the steamboat, the steam engine, and every station has here a video and a headset so you can watch what happened in 1800. So it's 1800, 1820, 1840, 1860, all the way through to 2050. So here we go. Here we have now Darwin and the Galapagos, the invention of photography, and Queen Victoria releasing the slaves. Then here we go now into the Oregon Trail and coming up to San Juan's. And we're looking a little bit of inventions. In the 1860s, Edison invented electricity. And when he eventually, he came up with a way, and this here, you'll see an actual cylinder that he was able to record. You might want to close this and show a close-up. He was able to record sound. Okay, hang on just a second. Okay, anyway, so down there's the speaker, and there's the cylinder, like this one, right?
Yes.
And then this reads, the mechanism then reads the music, and we have about 6, 7 of those.
Wow.
So this is an original Edison gramophone from the, because here you have this, so it's Edison right there. You see him talking. Here he invented electricity. Alexander Graham, but this is 1860s now, and here comes a train going through the 1860s. You have President Lincoln signing the Emancipation Proclamation and freeing the slaves, the invention of the typewriter where people could print their own books, and the telephone where they could start to talk to each other, because in the 1840s we have the first on What God Has Wrought, This here is an actual saddle, as President Lincoln ordered the freeing of the slaves. This is an actual saddle where black men could serve, the colored troops they call it, and served in the Civil War. And this is an actual saddle from the Civil War, an early projector. Now we're getting here then into the 1880s. In 1893, we had the Chicago World Fair, the first electric fair, because Edison just invented electricity. But they also, for the first time, had, where they got all the religions together, the World Parliament of Religion. And at the World Parliament of Religion is, of course, where the Baha'i faith was mentioned for the first time. So we love to talk about that event. And you'll see international villages, and down here you see all the world religions, sort of their books, and just sort of a representation. And down here we have books. They also built the Brooklyn Bridge during their time. And now we're getting into Marconi and Helen Keller and Tesla. They're opening up the Panama Canal. We went to the North Pole and the South Pole. The NAACP, the formation of of course, the colored organization. The Wright brothers began to have their first flight. Mount Rushmore, and the tycoons at that time, Carnegie, Ford, and so on. So now we're moving right along. We're getting into the 1920s. And you see Einstein is happening, Gandhi is happening. You had Ford over there, but now with Ford motor cars, we're also getting into traffic lights. And the inventor of the traffic light was a black man. So now we're getting into, from radio, we're getting into film production. You also will now see the building of the towers in New York. World War I brought about the League of Nations. Charles Lindbergh goes to Africa. And just to let you know that Peter's father was a general in the Army, and at that time the Air Force belonged to the Army. And it was Peter's father who one day, this young man came and asked to borrow an airplane because he wanted to fly to Paris. And I have in my basement a telegram that says, "Dear General Cheatham, just to let you know, I just arrived in Paris, signed Charles Lindbergh." And it's right at my home, so I haven't brought it into here yet. But now that photography is coming into existence, we're moving right along, because now we're in the 1940s, World War II, and television is invented. So technology is really coming together very rapidly. And so you go from League of Nations to United Nations. We're climbing up in Mount Everest. And now as we're getting from television invention so quickly now, science and religion, it's amazing how quickly, because in 20 years, we're already on the moon.
Wow.
Now that we're on the moon, imagine from television to on the moon. I was there when they first went to the moon. And so, but a lot of things happened during that time period. We had the civil rights movement with Martin Luther King that you are going to be talking about. Apartheid in Africa. We're having, for the first time, climate change discussions where we have Earth Day. So a lot of things really happened in the 1860s. Look at now the technology in improving, because here's a first laptop. So this is the keyboard that sort of snaps into this, and for the first time you could take a computer away from your desk.
Wow.
So now we're getting in the 1880s, so from the 60s on the moon, we're now getting to the era where, for instance, this is a piece of the Berlin Wall. In 1889, there's another piece right there. And so we're inventing now the computers, we're inventing the early cell phones, the Berlin Wall is coming down, Princess Di is making the point of HIV pandemic in the world that you really indeed, don't catch it just by being with somebody. And the English Channel, I crossed the English channels many times, but now you can drive from Paris to London underneath the English Channel. So it's really an amazing story.
Wow.
Now we're moving right along in the early computer down there. You see them down there, what they look like. And now we're going into 2030, 2050. So if you look at technology, how it evolved so quickly, what do we think, and let's say in 20 years from now? We know all the problems, so we don't talk about that. In this place here, we talk about the solutions. So let's say that, robots. So robots will be replacing probably manufacturing. It will probably replace agriculture. That means we're going to have a massive loss of jobs. So how are people going to feed their families? This is a question. And I'm saying, let's talk about solutions. And I'm going to bring into that the principles of the Baha'i faith. Right now, we can 3D print a house. So we can 3D print houses. They've already done that, senior housing in Holland and many other places, right? So if, for instance, now, the Baha'i faith has a principle of a no begging law, right? So when I travel in India, especially when I travel there amongst many countries I traveled to, 65 of them, but when in India, the no begging law was really very prevalent and very important. So if we have how do people feed themselves if they don't have jobs? So what we should have is a work exchange program. That meaning, unless you're too young, too old, or too sick, you automatically qualify. But if you're healthy and young enough, if you have a career, then you purchase maybe your ink for 3D printing. But if you're not able to have a job, but you are able to contribute, so you have a point system or a bartering system in exchange for maybe writing an opera or planting some vegetables or help to paint somebody's house. You then, in exchange for that, you get your ink to print your house, ink to print your food, your pizza, your medication. So you'll get your education free on screens. So the basic human needs or human need requirements can really be bartered or can be offered through a gloated system that gets around what I call the begging law, or having everybody sit at home and not work and get in exchange something for nothing. So, you're looking even what would happen if something happens, what would happen to the financial system? So what if Greta Thunberg is right and the oceans are rising, the harbors are flooding? It will instantly interrupt global traffic or global commerce. And with that, Wall Street would have a terrible time. The pandemic already impacted it, right? So, but then you look at blockchain. Now you have virtual money. So I think our youth is walking into a future where maybe the financial system will be a virtual system, where maybe your careers will be at home, where you can work through your technology, where you can get your food and your housing produced through new technology, because every 20 years technology has hugely and rapidly increased. So we think that possibly, they're already building space elevators, Tesla in Japan, because the discussion is that Jeff Bezos, that industry or maybe even residency might be up in the sky. Because if oceans are rising and land is shrinking, we may have to go into living accommodations in the sky. And so, but I can promise you, grandma is not going to go and live in the sky. So you're going to have to learn how to travel from maybe your space housing or your homes in the sky, and be able to visit grandma while she's still down there on Earth, because you could always figure out how to live on Mars. However, we look at Sir Richard St. Barbe Baker, and he was a Baha'i who in 1922, this is a centenary, invented conservation, and he recognized, unless we're heading to look like Mars, when he looked at the Sahara Desert, we knew that we had to plant trees. And he became known as the man of trees. And he traveled all over the world. Paul Hanley just wrote a biography on him. And Paul Hanley will come to Seattle to give a talk on this amazing first conservationist who formed the International Tree Foundation. And Chogi Effendi, the guardian of the Baha'i faith, became the first member. So there's very much a clear connection between climate, conservation, science and technology, and the Baha'i faith. And this is really a unity museum that talks not so much about the religious traditions and our core activity, but this is a Baha'i-inspired museum that talks about the principles of the Baha'i faith and how we as individuals all can contribute towards this new race of men. Thank you.
You're an amazing lady. I love you so much. Thank you.